of course, joined here by Councillors Mihevc and Ana Bailão and James Pasternak, and they'll be saying a few words once I give you an update on the shelter situation. At all times, the safety and well-being of Toronto citizens is my utmost priority, and that I know of my council colleagues, and it must be the top priority of the city government. This winter, as we face the unprecedented combination of extremely cold temperatures, dramatically increased demand on our shelter system, that has made this responsibility top of mind. The temperatures, the influx of refugees we've experienced over the last 2 years, and the pressures of a huge unmet mental health challenge have placed unprecedented pressure on our shelter system. I've always been clear that I will continue to support the advice of our professional city staff as they contend with the complex issue of homelessness, and we have made great strides forward in recent years. Over the past weeks and throughout the holiday period, I've received daily updates along with my staff from the Shelter Support and Housing Division. And I'm going to give you the update I received this morning in the same form that I received them each day over the holiday period. Last night, at our winter respite sites, the Better Living Centre had 99 spaces filled out of 140. 41 spaces were available. Cowan had space for 16. Margaret's, St. Felix, Progress and Park Road were at capacity. Our Streets to Homes outreach workers encountered 14 people on the street, 12 males and 2 females. 3 individuals accepted services and were transported. 1 man went to Fred Victor, 1 woman was transported to Sistering, and 1 woman was transported home. 11 people refused services. Shelter staff also attended the Moss Park safe injection site when it closed, where there were 3 people inside the trailer. 1 person requested a token to go to the site at 21 Park Road. 2 people were transported to the bus station where they stored their belongings and then requested tokens to go to 21 Park Road. I had a chance to see some of this for myself last night when I visited 3 sites, including the Better Living Centre, to get input from clients and to thank our hardworking staff. The truth of the matter is that we are seeing dramatically increased demand from previous years, driven largely by the factors I mentioned a moment ago, the refugees, mental health issues, and the weather itself. There has been a 30% increase in the nightly average use from this time last year. And staff, under the leadership of Shelter Support and Housing General Manager Paul Raftis and City Manager Peter Wallace, and a whole lot of people at the agencies that, in fact, as you know, help to operate the majority of our shelters, have been working doggedly to try and contend with this evolving reality. City Council, too, has been clear in the direction and support that it has offered. Last year, late last year, Council approved a staff recommendation to increase the low-barrier services available in the winter months in recognition of the dangers of this season to those experiencing homelessness. In fact, this plan was put forward well in advance of the winter months. And then in December, Council also directed staff to add 400 additional spaces to the system through a combination of winter respite centres, existing shelters, and hotel rooms. As of this morning, we're approximately halfway through the opening of those 400 spaces. We have opened 6 winter respite services that are available continuously until April 15th at locations right across the city. Among these sites, the latest one is the Better Living Centre, a facility that is owned by the city and offers 110 spaces for displaced homeless people. This site is accessible by transit thanks to a rerouted TTC bus line, and staff have also been distributing as needed taxi chits through the Peter Street Housing Referral Centre. But even with these additional measures, demand continues to increase and the system is undoubtedly under strain. Notwithstanding all of our efforts, the Council approved capacity limit of 90%, which has virtually never been met over the years, continues not to be met. Even with increased capacity, this leaves us too close to the edge in these unprecedented weather and social conditions. And so, to help address this issue in the short term, we have now taken action to again extend the capacity of the Better Living Centre as of last night. And so as of last night, this facility went from 110 to 140 spaces. And staff will add an additional 10 spaces in the days to come, bringing the total capacity of the Better Living Centre up to 150. This represents 150 spaces that did not exist a couple of weeks ago and represents the 6th respite centre that we identified as being best placed on the list of options in a city-owned building that was able to be converted on a fairly rapid basis for this use. In addition to that expansion, the remaining 200 council-directed spaces will come online in the coming weeks. And city staff will also be opening 291 permanent shelter beds this year, with the first 60 opened at the Salvation Army Hope site within the next 10 days. All of these strategies are directed at making sure that shelter is available to all of those who need it. There are no easy solutions, and we must address our city's needs as they evolve. I discussed this with city staff yesterday, and they advised me that we are likely to soon be in a position to require a 7th winter respite site, which means moving now to ensure that it can be operational in the next couple of weeks. When it comes to identifying and operationalizing these sites, staff has been weighing a number of factors, including the duration of their availability, as we need the locations to be available until April, the suitability of facilities, their location, and their capacity. Within the sites considered, the federally owned armories have always been and remain an available option, along with other city sites. Staff has been in touch with the Armed Forces personnel since December, and based on their advice yesterday, they will now be requesting from the Government of Canada formal confirmation that the Moss Park Armory can be made available as a 24-hour respite centre for up to 100 beds until April 15th. Later today, I'll be speaking to Federal Minister of Public Safety, Ralph Goodale, and will reiterate our request that they work with us and our provincial partners to provide answers related to the availability of Moss Park by the end of day tomorrow, so that we will know if that site is indeed the best available option for preparing the 7th Winter Respite Centre. We need to make sure that we are providing the best possible resources to our staff and to our vulnerable populations, and that means all options are on the table, including the use of the Moss Park Armory. As the situation evolves, we must work our way through the list of appropriate measures, and that is exactly what will be done. Of course, these issues cannot be just dealt with in the short term. Housing and homelessness are a very real urban issue in Canada, and in particular here in the City of Toronto, Canada's biggest city, and in fact the regional catchment area for a lot of people who end up in the City of Toronto from throughout the region. They are the responsibility, these challenges, of all citizens and all levels of government. City Council has asked staff to add 3 additional permanent shelters to our system in 2018, and work is underway to identify and open these sites. And I've indicated to you before, this is very challenging work. More needs to be done here, and I'll be addressing myself to that on an ongoing basis, a continuous basis in the coming days. But I think it is also time for some very direct comment on some of the reasons as to why we are where we are. I mentioned that I visited 3 shelter sites last night. And while there, I had a chance to speak with quite a few of the clients. As a matter of interest, 2 were refugees recently arrived from Montreal. 4 were people who told me they had come from Mississauga, Oakville, and Hamilton, respectively, because there were no local facilities available to them. The vast majority of all the others I spoke to, and the vast majority in total of the people I spoke to, volunteered to me in conversation that they either had a mental health issue, an addiction issue, or both. They were very discouraged by the complete lack of support for people in their condition. One man asked me the most obvious question: who would choose to live here? He went on to say that he doesn't think people understand that we, meaning himself and the others, and this was at Peter Street, don't want to be here. He said those things to me as he told me of his continuous struggles with deep depression. In the shelter where I met him, he sees a psychiatrist once a month, whereas in proper supportive housing, he would be receiving continuous support and counseling as he tried to get back on his feet and address his mental health issues. Many of these are also the people who sleep on the streets, the ones that I referred to earlier on that our Streets to Homes outreach workers approached last night and every night. They feel unsafe in shelters. They don't feel they're getting access to the complex support that they require. I do want to acknowledge that some new funds have come our way in recent months for this purpose, thanks largely to the efforts of Housing Minister Peter Milchin in the Government of Ontario. But I would be remiss if I did not note that when it comes to homelessness and beyond, we do have, as well, a mental health crisis in Toronto. As I indicated at the recent Big City Mayors meeting held before the end of the year, I'll be stepping up my demands for action on this and trying to show some national leadership on this, but my principal responsibility is here in Toronto because I believe that this unresolved issue, unaddressed issue, is a big part of why we're here today. We pride ourselves on our healthcare system, and yet a majority of the people in our shelters and on our streets are not getting the healthcare they need, in this case mental health care, and this must be addressed. I hope that some of the activists who are plain-spoken on homelessness, as well they should be, will join me in making it clear that one of the root causes of a good deal of the homelessness and the strain on the capacity of our shelter system ties back to mental health and addiction issues, which are largely unaddressed. I mentioned earlier that I'll be addressing myself to the issue of permanent shelter capacity in the days ahead, but I will also do so closely questioning our staff as to what is really needed to address the root problem we are experiencing on a long-term basis, because I continue to believe that as we look at segment by segment of the people that are filling the shelters today, that there are particular needs they have that go beyond simply providing more shelter capacity. Simply adding more places to put your head down, emergency housing without real support for people who need real support will, to me, just be postponing addressing the real issue again, as has been done for decades. To help move these discussions along, I have this morning requested an emergency meeting sometime in the next 7 days on mental health and homelessness with the Ministers of Health and Housing for the Province of Ontario, so that I can engage them in active discussion on this. Toronto and Toronto residents have special needs in this area, special needs both in the context of the size of the challenge and also the types of the challenges that we face in this, the country's biggest city. And it falls under the health system for us to work together with the Province of Ontario and the federal government to address this challenge. Finally, and very importantly this morning, I want to express my thanks to our city staff and to the staff of the agencies who work with us sheltering the homeless. They were providing me with reports every single day, including Christmas Day and New Year's Day, but more importantly, they were delivering caring service and working with those who deliver caring service on a person-to-person basis to people in these different shelter facilities over that very same period of time. While there are some very serious communications issues to be resolved, and in that regard I welcome the review to be done by the Ombudsman, no one can doubt the caring and compassion brought to this situation by the people who are trying to help the homeless. And I hope that in some of the things that we've indicated we're moving forward to do today, that we've indicated our resolve to continue to take all necessary steps to address this issue. I would now like to ask Councillor Joe Mihevc, our poverty advocate, to come forward and say a few words.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. Good morning to everyone. I want to focus my comments by providing some historical context to the existing shelter crisis. I do this not to excuse anything, but as a way of pointing out the enormity of the task that is before the city. I've been on the CDNR for Community Development and Recreation for most of my political career. The shelter capacity issue has always been a hot topic, as it is today. The real beds in real shelters had been constant around 4,200 beds. This had not changed for the last 10 years. Today, however, the situation has changed dramatically. We know that the housing crisis has intensified. It is harder and harder for people to afford their rents, and this is cascading down to poor members of our society. The end result of these larger social economic processes is that it has pushed more and more vulnerable people to the streets. In response, the city has realized that we need to expand our shelter system dramatically in a very short period of time. We had a system, as I said, of 4,200 beds. We now, in the past year or so, have increased the size of that system to closer to 6,000. This uptick has caused us to look at expanding dramatically the use of motels, to expand regular shelter beds, and to begin our winter respite system. The winter respite system now includes 6 facilities spread throughout the downtown, with 1 in Scarborough. These are not regular shelter beds, but cots and mats on floors, usually in a large room. This is a new service developed in 2017 to 2018. We have 6 of them now, and that includes, of course, the Better Living Centre. Yes, they are a bandage on a bandage, providing right now for service for about 400 plus people. The Mayor just announced the investigation of a possible 7th winter respite centre. Council knows, and staff in shelter housing and support know, that this is not enough. The respite cots and mats need to become regular shelter beds. There are plans and budget monies approved by Council to add significant numbers of beds in a more humane fashion, and that would include, of course, smaller rooms, real beds, and support staff. But these kinds of facilities take 12 months to 18 months to deliver because the city